Hey everybody, I see the chat is already jumping. Some of you have been waiting for a little while. Um, that is awesome. I'm so glad you guys are out here waiting. Welcome to Just Shelve It, my latest episode of Shooting the Shelf, where I bring on someone and we just talk about all things collectible, nerdy, geeky, whatever it is that we want to talk about, um, as you would, uh, just hanging out. So, um, we'll just jump right into it. Again, just thank you everybody for being here. I really appreciate it. And I'm going to bring on my one of my newer friends that I've met via the Mythic Legions line, and that is Danny Caudle, aka Riverswift Customs. Let me see, hit this button here. Danny,
Hello, everyone. How are you?
welcome, welcome to the shelf.
It is my pleasure. It's an honor. I've been a fan of this show since you started doing this sort of a format, and it has been a blast. And I really do appreciate you having me on.
Awesome. I'm glad you could join me, and Curtis is asking if we've established if pants are optional. Hey, as long as I don't know visually, you can wear whatever you want.
I'm pretty sure that in Curtis's case, pants are optional. In my case, I wanted to feel like a big boy, so I did, in fact, put on pants and even shoes,
Oh wow.
which
Okay.
I never do in the house.
Okay. I don't like shoes, so I took mine off as soon as I got home. I've been dog sitting all weekend, um, so yeah, I got to take the shoes off. um,
This is my everyone. This is my wife, Courtney here, who's going to be making, I'm sure, many random um, comments. Oh, Patrick Boyle. Hey, how you
Patrick,
doing, brother?
yeah, welcome. Thanks for watching. All right, so Danny, why don't I guess I don't even really fully remember how it is we connected. I know it was on Instagram. I don't know if
Yeah.
someone
Well,
commented on someone else's post and then we just started messaging and
yeah, and that's how it happens. I think with a lot of us on Instagram, is that we kind of find our people. Whenever I see somebody who does something creative, experimental, out there, something that I haven't thought of, a new technique that I haven't used, like you turned me on to using some pearlescent effects, which I've always sort of thought I don't know if I can work like that. Um, but you turned me on to stuff like that. Some of your bashes, there's Pilgrim. This is the bridge. Some of your bashes and the experimental stuff like Pilgrim's doing
oh yeah.
some chopping and slicing. That stuff has fueled my creative juices, and I'm sure it was something you saw that I saw on one of your customs, or you saw on one of mine that sort of put us together. But finding this group of folks that the cabal is, and um, realizing that your mentors are your peers are your mentors, and that
Yeah.
we're all teaching and learning from each other, the sharing, which you and I and Pilgrim and Brian Shea have a little group chat that we enjoy, where we bounce ideas off of each other and give each other inspiration, and it's kind of a safe place to throw your work in progress stuff that you're not really sure about, that
Yeah.
may look kind of goofy. Recently I was trying to teach myself how to paint better. I don't feel like I feel like I've come a long way. But when I started out in this, it was all for me, dry brushing, and I'm talking dry brushing primer, because I'm so afraid of thick coats. And As I've become more comfortable through dry brushing and then adding washes and trying to do different techniques, and watching, the wonderful academy that was it MAFC put on a couple of weeks
Yeah.
ago.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
think it
with
was
me,
last Saturday. Yeah.
that stuff, that kind of stuff. It inspires me to, as I learn more, to build on what I've already learned, because now I can understand this stuff more, right? And
Yeah.
learning this new different style and working with more wet paint has sort of, it sped me up, and it's kind of taken my painting in a different direction, which I feel like is good. We need to explore that stuff and be experimental and figure out what our process is. I think this is alluded to in that class is that, not everyone's going to be comfortable with every type of painting or type or
Sure.
style of painting.
Yeah. Yeah. Pilgrim throwing that out there. Yeah. I didn't get to watch it yet. I caught a couple minutes. I was working on so much stuff last weekend. I didn't get to watch much of it, but yeah, it looked really cool. I've seen a lot of people posting and sharing techniques and stuff they learned from it. So I definitely want to check it out.
Yeah,
Hey,
the
Oz.
focus ahead. I'll go ahead.
No, I was just saying Oz was in on a Skelevator video last night, and
Oh, very
he's
cool.
stopping by. So thanks for joining us.
So
Yeah,
yeah,
like
that
oh, good.
okay. So yeah, I will say that one of the neat things that I learned out of that Nikki video, other than some of the gear that people are using and some of the techniques that they're using, she does stuff with contrast paints that runs completely counter to how Games Workshop tells you how to use them.
Okay.
And I realized that I have never been comfortable with contrast paints, and especially with the way they're used by Games Workshop in their instructional videos. I never really thought about looking into other ways and techniques to use it. Nikki uses very small amount of paint on the brush when she's using that stuff, and it sort of got me out of like, okay, I will only use this for like watering down and making strange washes or throwing over metallics. Now I feel like
Okay.
we can use these things a little more efficiently if we work with the techniques, because it is a different scale than most what those were built for. So modifying that technique in that way and learning how to apply the skills that you would think would be not as wouldn't necessarily come through as much that are in the wargaming
Hmm.
side, and then applying that to painting figures.
Yeah, because that's how I got into painting stuff was through D&D minis. Got into my first game like 7 years ago, and they're like, "Hey, we're gonna paint this Saturday. You want to come over?" So me and two of the guys got together, and we just sat there and painted. I was like, "I've never done anything like this before," and it was just a blast. So yeah, it's just been nice. And then I modified some Marvel Legends, or just because like I wanted the character that they didn't make,
Mm-hmm.
and yeah, just transitioning into the Mythic Legions has been so much more fun. Um, just because the details and everything there, like because the Marvel Legends are all just smooth bucks for the most part, and they're just so blah to paint.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Yeah, that's the Mythic Legions. And in the 3D printer folks and sculptors that are out there that are creating the add-on parts, they go out of their way to make these things easy to customize and work with. The buck system for Legions is super. I mean, where else are we getting stuff like that? This is something that McFarlane could have taken advantage of with his new lines, where there is incredible engineering going on, but the scale's a little off in some cases, and you can't really bash certain parts together. You know exactly what you can do with 1.0s and 2.0s, and then there are things that you can do that you didn't know you could do. Some of the stuff that Jeremy's doing
oh,
with grommets and fitting in different sized arms and legs, and creating new parts that go into
hold
the
on,
knee
Danny. I
joints.
think
And we're losing me. Hey, babe.
yeah, I think I don't know if anyone else is experiencing this, but you froze and got all robotic in your audio. Let's see. I'm gonna take you out and bring you back in. Hold on one sec. Are you there?
I am here. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I guess it was me that was
Oh, okay.
pulling out.
All righty then. Looks like we're back up and running. But yeah, talking about we were talking about the system, the way that the legions come apart and can be put back
Hmm.
together again. And I think the horsemen are doing a great job now, especially of marketing that more and really pointing out that the customizing is easy. So yeah, uh, this is a line that was made for us, and it's a line I never even knew I wanted. I started 15 years ago just doing simple sculpting and repaints on Green Lantern figures, which is when I first gave this a shot, I'm like, this can't be hard. Well, it turns out that if you don't learn the basics, it's really hard to make something look good.
Yeah.
And I didn't spend that time, and I would get frustrated. And eventually I stopped. I've got like 30 or 40 Lantern, Green Lantern and Red Lantern and Sinestro Corps guys that I've done. And, if I go back and look at them now and I'm like, oh, okay, I understand what I did wrong. I could have done this differently now that I know the basics and the techniques, which is why it's really important not to get discouraged
Yeah.
and to go watch some tutorials, learn the basics of color, learn the basics of how much paint you want to put on the brush. Start with less paint on your brush than you think you ever need, because you can always add more, but it's really hard to take paint off,
Yeah.
especially once it gets gloppy and sticky and messy. So starting off with that very small amount of paint on your brush, I think, was the key step for me to really explore this world and learn how to do it correctly. Going from dry brushing to a little more till I find where I know, it's tolerant for me to be able to quickly perform, a little bit of a painting job on a figure. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. In one of the subgroups I joined, out of Mythics people from, I think it was one of the "My Wife Is Going to Kill Me" chats. I think it was in there. Someone, I think Will White, Billy Beige posted I think it was him posted a video of someone painting I think it was a Warhammer mini, but it kind of looked like it had, Prince Adam's head,
Mm-hmm.
and the person just smeared paint on. I mean, it looked like they were dipping it in ketchup. Like, it was so, like, just to show. I think someone was trying to say, like, this is what it would look like if I tried to paint. And I was like, they tried really hard to make it look that bad. Like,
And
you can
there's
see the
something to be said. There's something to be said for also trying really hard to make something look bad, because you can learn from that. You guys know I do a lot of weird, goofy stuff with my figures. I mean, this guy right now, I'm working on Grandpa Goblin. This was
that's so good.
this guy. This guy, we chopped a goblin head up top, an orc head underneath. We still got a little work to do on the collar, but I want him to have that "get off my lawn" look, so I gave him the fist. And this is my favorite thing in the world for goblins that's ever been put out here, are the orc feet and the orc
Yeah.
hands packs. To me, this is what makes goblins work. The base armor, hands and feet, they're great, but this gives it that charm and that goofiness that I associate with goblins. And then,
Yeah.
we're working on
Especially
a
because
little
they're just
painting
a
for the guy.
little bit, too out of scale for their body. Like, they don't look disproportionate, but they're like,
I like them to be more disproportionate.
yeah,
I like the goofy, sort of embracing the goofiness of what goblins are. Plunderlings came along, and that's a little too out of the goofy stuff. But I mean, I love them. Don't get me wrong. But in my mythos world, they would be a little
yeah,
too goofy. This gives me
yeah,
that perfect blend of like '80s goblins, '80s Brian Frow, Jim Henson stuff.
absolutely, yeah, yeah. I totally agree. Like, that's kind of some of the stuff that caught my attention back during quarantine a year and a half. Not during quarantine, but I think that around that second batch of stimulus checks were coming out. I was looking on Big Bad Toy. I didn't know what Mythic Legions were, and I just saw these random figures that were in stock, and I was like, oh, those ones look really cool. I was like, all right, I'm not going to go crazy. I'll just focus on a couple of the green ones, and that snag head with that, just look like classic, like, not exactly Labyrinth, but just totally looked like
Right.
something out of a Jim Henson movie, and you know, yeah, it was just great stuff. Yeah, I have
Yeah. I
one
mean, there's an
Plunderling,
aesthetic.
and he's great.
Yeah. There's an aesthetic there that really taps into like that '80s, and it's my head canon like goblin and orc from Forgotten Realms, right? You know,
Okay.
um, yeah, the one when we were playing D&D, which we did without miniatures or boards or anything. We just sat in the corners of the room and we did all of the movement in our heads, right? And
Okay.
just tried to be honest. So it was all up here. There were no miniatures. There was no dungeon layout. You had to create it in your head. And like my sources were that weird Rankin and Bass, the
Oh
Lord of
yeah.
the Rings cartoons, some of the
Yeah.
weird like Sid and Marty Krofft stuff from like the late 70s, early 80s. And
Yeah.
yeah, so like that, and then of course Jim Henson. It totally informed my head canon for what that world looks like. You know, when I think of like um, D&D back then, and then into my late teenage years when we were playing, and then Drizzt came along, and that became a whole thing, and you fell in love with Salvatore, and that is really where my love of fantasy comes from, is Dungeons and Dragons, R.A. Salvatore, Narnia, and then of course the billion books that I've read since I've been a kid in
Yeah, I
that
guess
world.
you're an avid reader and you
Mhm.
listen to a lot of stuff, right?
Yeah, especially when I'm painting and when I'm doing a road task at work, um, I will throw on an audiobook on my commute home. I'll throw on an audiobook. I just finished redoing the Belgariad, and it's interesting to go, which is by David and Lee Eddings. Did the Belgariad and the Malorian, which is a classic fantasy series. I think they were 70s, 80s, if I'm remembering correctly. But it's neat to go back and re-explore those books as an older nerd, and to see there's problematic stuff in there, and we have to figure out a way to divorce ourselves from the person that we are now, and the person that writer was then, right? Because the
Yeah.
worldviews are so different. So you kind of have to divorce that from the art, but you have to deal with it. I don't necessarily like some of the treatment of women a lot of the treatment of women in older fantasy. I think it's disgusting, and I think that modern fantasy has really stepped up in terms of gender equality. I'm thinking about guys like Brian McClellan or Brandon Sanderson, where you're writing strong women, and you're not writing as if you're a man trying to write a woman. You go back to some of these wonderful female writers like a Robin Hobbs, who writes better male relationships than I think a lot of male writers do. Um, and that's because there's a lot of things that we don't put out there that I feel like in closed doors we might. So that's in terms of that stuff. I can't I can't think back to a time when I wasn't reading fantasy or comics. Yeah, Peter Boyle in there, Loving Eddings,
Yeah.
R.A. Salvatore. Recently I've been into, of course, Wheel of Time, and going back to that after a sojourn away from it. You've got some books that Jesse's recommended, a few other folks have recommended that I have on my list. Just started the new Brian McClellan series, and I'll say, like, anybody who's into fantasy that wants something that's a little off, a little different. Brian McClellan does a series called Powder Mage, which is Napoleonic gun fu Jedi
Hmm.
powder snorting dudes who snort
Okay.
powder, can bend bullets, can fire two shots at once, have the super sight and the speed and the strength and all the stuff that you would think. Um, but yeah, I mean, are just terrifying on a battlefield, which is full of other guys with muskets and cannons and things of that Napoleonic nature. So if you guys
Okay.
ever want to check out something that's just a little weird, but still has that epic fantasy feeling, that Hero's Quest sort of thing, or Joseph Campbell sort of Mythic Quest that you want to check out. Go in there and give Brian McClellan a spin. He's really juicing up my pirates. A lot of that's coming through, and I keep meaning to do like a straight up, Napoleonic powder mage, but it has to be the right perfect parts. And I think Wolf King, with some of their pirate stuff that's coming out, is really sort of hitting into that time period where people wore
Yeah.
the tricorns and all the fun hats. So
Yeah, and those new highwayman heads that
yeah,
they teased the other day.
yeah, y'all super. Are you kidding? Yeah, that hat. I have to have it. I have to have like a dozen of them. The oversized comical parrot hat they had a few weeks ago. Oh my God, come
Oh
on,
yeah,
who is
yeah,
that? I need one like this size. So
yeah. um, yeah. Some like I think I recommended the Chronicles of Prydain to you. Like that was my
mhm,
gateway into fantasy. Like as a kid, I saw like the weird animated Lion Witch in the Wardrobe
mhm,
from like the late '70s, early '80s, maybe. I saw the Hobbit cartoon, and my older brothers were into a lot of this stuff. Um, but then I kind of came back into it. Because they're 9+ years older than me, so I wasn't an only child, but I got to experience a lot of stuff on my own. Some things were inspired or kind of handed down from them, but I really got into it through the Black Cauldron, the Disney movie, which I never
okay.
saw. And then in
Mhm,
fifth grade, I found the comic book in my like math class during downtime. Loved it. Eventually read the books, and that was my go-to fantasy. Like at that point, I had not read any of the Chronicles of Narnia or The Hobbit or Lord of the Rings or any of that stuff in middle school. And then I got into Star Wars. It was when the
mhm,
Thrawn trilogy came out and all that stuff. So I went that way for a long time. And then I read a comic called Warlands from Pat Lee, Dreamwave Comics. It was like a subset in
I'm
Image.
familiar.
It was
Mhm,
kind of very anime style characters, but it was elves and dwarves, and it gave me this huge inspiration. I was already writing a story, and I was kind of like, this is going to circle back to the customizing. I didn't want to read too much fantasy because I wanted my stuff to be my own thing.
mhm.
I didn't want to like borrow from everyone, and then I started reading more stuff, and I'm like, oh, my stuff is
Everybody's borrowing from
there's
everybody.
crossover, but like
Mhm.
I feel like the ideas I had at the time were different enough that I wasn't like stealing from anybody. Um, and the same with painting. Like I've hesitated sometimes to watch tutorials and things because I don't know. I was like, oh, you got that from so and so. I'm like, well, yeah, they put a tutorial out. They want people to learn what they're doing. So trying to like break down that stigma in my head of borrowing ideas and instruction from people as being plagiarism, I guess.
Yeah, but that's yeah. I was actually just reading about a writer the other day where they were saying the first rule of our craft is to plagiarize. And fantasy is rife with it. We're all you know everything sort of boils back to you get your Jules Verne and your sort of like super adventure stuff from the 1800s. Then you have Tolkien coming in, and not long around the same time, somebody help Patrick help me out. Farford and Grey Mouser. Who did
Hmm.
those? I know he knows. But you had that. You had Robert Howard with the Conan series,
Oh
and
yeah.
we they kind of wove in together, and that's informed D&D. Along with a splash of Lovecraft. That was sort of the genesis of D&D, is pulling out of those worlds. And I think a lot of us grew up reading the Forgotten Realms books, or um, oh gosh, Elric of Elric books from the 70s and 80s.
Oh
Elric of
yeah.
Melbourne. Yeah. Because Elric was sort of the cool bad boy, the first cool bad boy fantasy guy. Fritz Lieber, I knew Patrick was going to get it. Fritz Lieber was writing some really cool stuff, way back. And correct me if I'm wrong, Patrick, but I think he was doing stuff in the 30s and 40s. Michael Moorcock with the Elric books. These are sort of the fountains that we've been drinking out of, right? Farford and Grey
Yeah.
Mouser has informed every fantasy sort of you know duo that sort of came after it in some way or another. You think about Drizzt and Wolfgar, who any of you guys who are familiar with the Drizzt books, they are Farford and Grey Mouser. And Salvatore will tell you, and he's told me to my face because I don't live very far away from him.
Oh cool.
And I go to his signings, and he's a sweetheart of a man, one of the best guys I've ever met, and will talk at length with you about the nerdiest stuff. And also really loves hockey because this is New England, and you have to love hockey. I love
Awesome.
hockey, but yeah, Crimson Lance series, another great R.A. Salvatore series. If I'm remembering that right, or maybe I'm thinking about a different one. Perhaps I am thinking of a different series with that. But you go back to those Some of the cool stuff that um, gosh, the Rarea novels. Very much draw on that Farfetch'd Gray Mouser archetype, where you have like the assassin thief, kind of a little bit pissed off all the time, and then you have the big bumbling barbarian that he hangs out with. Raceland and
Okay.
Caramon from the Dragonlance, are
Okay.
examples of that, where you sort of have that weird dynamic buddy cop. They don't really fit together, odd couple thing, and I love that stuff in fantasy, especially odd couple stuff. Just is right
Yeah.
up my alley.
That that's just making me think. I have not read a lot of those. There's so much I want to read. Like I have so many Star Wars books from the new canon I want to read. I'm trying to read Dune for the first time, but between like customizing and
Oh,
work,
good luck.
it's like I feel like I have to like separate one thing from like just time runs out. And
Time runs out, and that's
so as
that's where
much as I
we
love
are.
reading, I might start listening to audiobooks at work now. That
Audiobooks are great while I'm painting, and they tend to inform the characters I make. So the
that's
wizard in
great.
D&D with the hockey staff from Dresden, that is super fun. That's sort of like when we used to run Shadowrun back in the 90s. And for those of you familiar, Shadowrun is basically cyberpunk with magic, right? And we would lean a little heavier into the fantasy elements of it than we would into the sci-fi elements of it. And I mean that just reminds me, yeah, we had so much fun, sort of, living in those worlds and enjoying that fantasy stuff. But you start thinking about their correlations in comics, right? Most of the fantasy that's being written today, really is sort of interchangeable with some of the relationships that you see in the Marvel books or in DC. DC's gotten a lot better at relationship stuff, especially back in
Oh
some of
yeah,
the Green Lantern stuff, things like that. But that Marvel sort of soap opera. That's the stuff that I love in fantasy. That's one of the main reasons I love Drizzt. I mean, I think the folks of us guys who really like Drizzt, girls that really like Drizzt, the outsider that Drizzt is, and overcoming his outsiderness is something that we relate to. The empathy that he shows to everyone around him is something we relate to. I mean, people will say, Drizzt saved my life. Well, Drizzt saved my life a whole bunch of times. I've read even the bad Drizzt books. Have put smiles on my faces. And look, I love highbrow fantasy, giant epics that have massive stakes. That stuff's fun. But, sometimes you just want to read about guys hanging out and figuring out how to get into a town because you got a
yeah,
black guy, Drizzt, who can't be seen there or else he'll be attacked. That stuff
right.
resonates with me, and it's far more interesting than in a lot of cases than the big epic battles that you see in Lord of the Rings.
Yeah, yeah. I think I totally agree with you. The things in Lord of the Rings, that the battles are epic and great because you're so invested in those characters. Um, that like you want to make sure everybody gets out okay, and in a good story that's true to life, most of them, or at least some of them, aren't going to make it out.
Right.
So
Oh, I think you need
yeah,
that. You need to have actual, stakes involved where you are going to lose somebody. You are going to have, Boromir. Spoilers. Peace
they've
out.
had a few years to figure that out.
Right. But then you also have, like, the stuff that Peter Jackson kind of breathed into it, which was really bringing together that relationship between Frodo and Samwise, right? Like
Yeah,
that's a
yeah,
that's an important, healthy male relationship that we don't see enough of on television, or movies, or media in general. So to see that kind of love between two dudes, or brothers, and to some degree more than brothers, I
yeah,
felt like Peter Jackson really brought the humanity into it, because I love Tolkien, but God, it's a slog. Great world builder, excellent
yeah,
world builder. Not my favorite writer, and not my favorite style of writing. What he did was the most important thing at that time. I'm sure somebody else would have done it too, but he did an important thing, and it just all gelled together at the right time. And he had this
yeah,
great story and this great world that he created, right? But it's kind of you're going to find out when you get into Dune. Frank Herbert's kind of the same cloth. I figured it out when I tried to read Asimov when I was 12. I don't recommend reading Asimov when you're 12. No matter how advanced you think you are, you're just not gonna handle it. I
I
still
think
can't
that's
handle
why.
it. I'm 48.
I think I think that's why the Chronicles of Prydain landed so well for me, because like I might have been trying to read it on my own a couple of years before I was ready to. Because I mean,
Mm-hmm.
I grew up not sheltered, but I didn't get exposed to a lot of scary stuff. Just being a more conservative home and everything. So
Sure.
like there was some stuff in there that just I struggled feeling courage enough to read through. Just because I had such an active imagination, and uh, that it would linger with. I'd see like blue voodoo devil like haunts Amazon rainforest on the tabloids in the grocery store, and I wouldn't sleep for 3 days because
Same way. There was a point
um,
in time where I could not watch the Twilight Zone when I was probably until I was in my 20s. My mother would have it on at the latest hours of the night when we were asleep, and sometimes you'd wake up to that sound. And
yeah,
that, I mean, come on, one of the most classic themes / soundscapes of all time, right? I couldn't watch it until I was in my 20s, and now I'm like, I couldn't live without it. It's some of the most important social commentary that's ever been created was in the Twilight
oh
Zone.
yeah,
They took
yeah,
risks that nobody else, Roddenberry would take, but nobody else but Roddenberry would take in television at that point in time, and in writing. And oh my God, just showing us who we can be. We're the bad guys most of the time.
yeah.
That stuff was way ahead of its time, but it scared the crap out of me when I was a kid.
Oh,
I'm
absolutely.
like, I remember thinking back to, getting a hold of some of the old EC comics when I was a kid, and Bernie Wrightson's art would scare me,
Sure.
sneaking a Stephen King book when I really shouldn't. Yeah. Or checking in on, I remember when we got cable, because I think I was like 11 or 12 when we finally got cable. And, my mom was like, "Oh, you can't watch any of these movies on these channels." Again, we were very Southern conservative
Okay.
people, and yeah, and we weren't allowed to watch the bad stuff. But I remember sneaking in and watching um, Nightmare on Elm Street, Dream Warriors, and I'm like,
Okay.
that was my first intro to horror, right? And first I was like, "Oh wait, this is kind of the X-Men too," and it is. If you go back and watch Dream Warriors, there's a lot of
Okay.
teen superheroes in there. Way before we had had the X-Men shows and stuff like that. But that stuff, the naughty stuff always scared me, and I think that's why now I do love horror, and I do love science fiction, I do love fantasy, and all the things that we weren't supposed to do when we were kids,
Yeah.
especially in the 80s.
Yeah. Yeah.
Nancy
Somehow.
Reagan.
Yeah. Somehow I don't know. I don't know how I saw it because we didn't have cable. But like, not trying to get like deep into like my childhood or anything, but like my parents divorced when I was 6,
Mhm.
or split up when I was like turned 6 to 7, and somehow before that time when I was living in the house with my family, I saw Beastmaster on TV. I don't know if it was just like the Saturday afternoon
Yeah.
movie or I don't know, because we only got like the three basic channels. It was the eight. We didn't
Mhm.
have a cable box. It was that was it. It was the old dial TV thing, and uh, and I loved it. But that scene where those vampire bat things came down and like would wrap their
Mhm.
wings around someone and like the bones would felt like sent me screaming out of the basement. But like I was
Oh yeah.
able to like temper it enough. But like the Muppets on Sesame Street, like the aliens that would be like mo 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 mo, those would send me running from the basement. Like just certain things that were just enough off, even if it wasn't actually scary, just sent me running. And
Oh yeah. I mean,
I don't
I
know
think
how I
back to, we had PBS, right? So we had Doctor Who. Doctor Who's creepy as hell, man. When we were kids,
Yep.
especially, some of that stuff they were doing was just nuts. But it was, it's like, let's have scary stuff for kids. Hitchhiker's Guide, Doctor Who.
Yeah.
We had cool weird 80s fantasy stuff. We had the Motu movie and Beastmaster and oh gosh, Ice Pirates, which I think I made you read my giant diatribe about. If any of you 80s kids have not seen Ice Pirates in the last 20 years, do yourself a favor. There's some stuff in there where race is not really well dealt with, product of its time. There's issues with it. There's some racial and homosexual stereotyping that happens in that movie. But if you can separate that out and enjoy sort of the spirit of that movie, Ice Pirates is bat poop insane. It is just absolutely nutso, and you can tell that these people really, really tried hard to make this like a well-crafted B movie science fiction comedy. But I'm telling you
Yeah.
guys, once you see the space herpes giving aliens and the disembodied head of Bruce Valanche, I'm telling you guys, if you don't remember this, there are like corporate Amazon women who work for the disembodied head of Bruce Valanche and ride unicorns into battle on a spaceship in space.
Yeah.
Watch the movie.
I haven't. Again, that was one. Somehow I saw parts of it, and I'm pretty sure my brothers chased me out of it. Because I was so much younger or whatever. Yeah.
Oh, that was one of those naughty movies that would come on that was not naughty, but just naughty enough in the 80s to.
So when I got Beastmaster on DVD, I don't think I'd ever seen the whole thing because I'd only ever seen it on like TNT or TBS or anything after that. There's a whole scene where I don't remember her name. The character, like, she's like bathing in the river and she's like, I'm like, I don't remember this. I mean, granted, I was like 4, 5, 6 years old.
And it's probably the TV cut too.
Yeah, I'm sure it was cut for TV, but like, I was like, what did I just buy? And I think I bought it when I was going to school I went to a pretty conservative Christian college. So like, but it was PG and I'm like, how is this PG? And then I learned about the rating system.
Oh yeah.
Adding PG-13 shortly after that and everything. So yeah.
PG was different in the 80s. There's a lot of movies that were PG then that would never have even got allowed to go out into, theaters this time around with a rating below 17.
Like, I remember my brothers telling me about the movie Critters, and I thought it was literally like little woodland creatures that were eating people. So like rabbits and squirrels and stuff. So I would have nightmares about falling in a hole in the front yard and like a swarm of rabbits like chewing my feet off, and it would be paper mache underneath. Wake up screaming. So like it didn't take much to like set me off as a kid.
No, that's I think of like the first time I ever saw the last scene in Friday the 13th, the first movie. Oh my God! Okay. When the kids jumping out of the water into the boat, and I'm like, everything else was pretty terrifying up until that point, but just to have an ending that was that dark, to like a 10, 11, 12-year-old me was like, what? So, even for a horror movie, that's a pretty wild little ending, and it holds up today for the crap B movie that those movies are.
Sure.
First one's still pretty good.
I'll be honest, I've never actually watched. The only Nightmare on Elm Street or Friday the 13th I watched was Freddy versus Jason because I was working at the movie theater, and that's what the manager like had to screen that Thursday night before release. So those have just never been ones I've been attached to because, again, kids my age were watching them and telling me about it, and I'd be like, I'm not sleeping tonight because I didn't even see the movie and it would freak me out.
But for me, like it was the fact that we weren't supposed to be doing it. That was what made it fun. Just like D&D, just like heavy metal, just like growing your hair out. We weren't supposed to do that stuff, right? I mean, or growing our beards out like ridiculous people. We're not supposed to do that stuff. And we're adults now. We can do whatever the heck we want.
Yeah.
It's kind of cool.
I went to a concert. Again, it was a Christian concert because it was a youth group at my church, and they did a song. It was "If You're Happy and You Know It, Clap Your Hands."
But of course.
They added "If You're Happy and You Know It, Bang Your Head." I was like, I want to be able to do that. So I started growing my hair out, and like I didn't ask anybody. I just moved my part to the middle of my hair, and it was 90s. And then my mom was like, "Well, you're gonna have to like cut it. It's gonna be too thick." So I did like the shaved skater kid side.
Oh, sure.
Until I got to college and.
You get the little steps. Remember the
steps?
No,
it was just like up to about here from here down it was shaved or
Oh yeah.
buzzed, and then just long on top. But beard came from Dr. Grant in the Jurassic Park book. I was like, he has a
Mhm.
beard, he's cool. I want to be like him. Nowhere near smart, but yeah, that's where the beard came from. And then yeah, so yeah, I did my own thing for a lot of stuff, and there's just some things like I was too afraid to get in trouble on.
Sure.
But yeah, I think when I was talking with Sean on one of the first ones, I discovered Ninja Turtles because I saw a line of toys that I thought were based on the horoscope, and I looked away and saw the turtles and got into that. So I was
I
self-censoring.
I remember walking into the comic shop. I want to think I was 12, 13, maybe 13, maybe a little older. I might have been like 14 because it wasn't long before the Michael Keaton Batman came out. And this comic shop, this was the other comic shop. This was the one where all the weird kids went, right? We had two. Um, but the weird kids had the better comics. And I go in there and he has Death in the Family, you know. And I had never read Death in the Family, you know, the Batman with the 900 number for Robin. Um,
Yeah,
and I had never read Dark Knight. And I had never read Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. So I picked up like a reprint of the first issue of Turtles. I wanted to read some more of the adult stuff, right? I got a Cerebus. I remember getting a Cerebus and
oh, nice.
Death in the Family and Killing Joke. So this may have been like the late 80s. Okay. So I remember picking up these books and reading the Turtles for the first time. And you're like, oh, wow, this isn't Playmation or Playmates Turtles. This isn't
Yeah,
what we were going to see on television if it hadn't already come out yet. This was pretty hardcore underground 80s comics. You know, it's very
yeah,
violent. Not something I was used to seeing in comics. You know, even the Punisher, most of that stuff was off screen or done in a way where it wasn't overly graphic. And so seeing that stuff from the Turtles and weird stuff from Cerebus, and this wasn't stuff I'm supposed to be looking at. And I remember hiding some of these comics because I know my mother went through my stuff. She loved to find if I was doing any devil worshiping because this was the South in the 80s. My mother was super
yeah.
conservative, and we were at the height of, you know, Tipper Gore and people coming down. And what was it, the Tom Hanks TV movie about D&D? I don't know if you
Oh
remember
wow,
that.
I don't.
Oh no! So there was somebody's going to get me in the chat. There was a Tom Hanks movie, TV movie about the evils of Dungeons and Dragons. Very, very similar to some of the storylines in this most current. We won't spoil it. The most current Stranger Things, where you
Yeah,
have the Hellfire Club. And brings up another thing. I had to hide my Hellfire Club comics. My X-Men comics had the Hellfire Club in it because I had the word Hellfire. And we were just so afraid of dealing with things of an occult or other capital O other nature in the 80s. And we didn't know what to blame for some of the behavior stuff that we were seeing. Of course, being magnified by the media and the hype around that, and
sure.
the legislature that was surrounding it at the time. But yeah, there was a TV movie in the 80s. Tom Hanks. They were playing a game that was something like Dungeons and Dragons, Wizards and
Mhm.
Warriors, something like that. Yeah, there was a devil worshiping cult that they came out. And after that hit, it was like Frederick Wortham in the 60s with the book that he wrote about comics, with Corruption of Innocence,
Yep.
where we
Yeah.
had, yeah, which instituted the comic code, or helped to bring about the comic code.
Hmm.
But you know, we had this witch hunt going on. You know, now it's video games and it's music, a little bit less so. But back then it was D&D and video games and not video games yet, but D&D and heavy metal and things of that nature that were
Hmm.
driving our kids to the devil. And you know, the more you tell kids that this is naughty and bad, the more they're going to seek it out. And come to find out that what we were really doing when we were playing these games was relationship building. We were
Hmm.
learning communication skills, learning creative problem solving.
Yeah.
You know, whenever if I go to hire somebody and I can tell that they're a geek, and you know, if somehow I can sneak in a Dungeons and Dragons type of a question or a comment or something in there and get determined, I'm like, okay, these are my people because I know how smart they are. I mean, yeah, I know. Well, there's a lot of smart people in the world, but I know that there's a particular set of skills you get from playing D&D, social skills, and imagineering or creative thinking skills, problem
Yeah.
solving skills that you don't necessarily get in school. We don't teach
Yeah.
creative problem solving in school.
Yeah. Yeah, because like you got assigned to stuff and you had to work with people you didn't want to work with. Whereas with D&D, like because I never played until 7 years, so
Sure.
I missed out on all of it as a kid. But like, um, you get yeah, I saw someone made a meme or a joke that was going around like for your resume if you haven't worked in a while but you played D&D, like it was like, you know, uh cooperative team building exercises, like it was just all the different things you were just saying. And I was like, that's so true. Like you actually choose to get together, talk about stuff and work through. I mean, yes, it's a game and the point is to have fun and everything, but it's yeah, it's really cool.
Yeah, I mean, for me, there's a straight line from what we were doing playing D&D, what we were doing reading fantasy novels, and talking about comics, and geeking out with your friends, and who's more powerful, Thor or Hulk, which is still the discussion we're having today in movies, in really
Yeah.
fun ways, and it's like they're doing now what we were doing on the playgrounds when we were kids, and we get to see it happening. I hope that everyone understands we're in the middle of several different golden ages right now when it comes to entertainment. The nerds
Absolutely.
won. Where on earth? How did we get from GI Joes in the '80s and hanging out with your friends and play D&D to there's a straight line to it. But how did we get here, guys? I'm a 48-year-old man who bought a toddler ukulele to put on an action figure. It's because we won.
Yeah.
And you know what? We've a lot of us. I think a lot of us. This is our outlet for creativity. Is action
Absolutely.
figures, is painting. For me, I don't paint heads. I build characters. Right. It's really hard for me to just sit down and paint a head. I tried to do it. I tried to do it a few weeks ago, and I wound up creating an entire character, and a guy that I'll probably finish up not too long from now. But these guys have it's storytelling, it's imagination, it's make believe, it's the fun stuff that we used to do as kids in our heads, or with our GI Joes, or out on the dirt tracks, like building little tracks and running our Evil Knievel bikes over. We're doing that same stuff, or trying to write comics when we're kids, right?
Yeah.
You find this creativity through Mythic Legions and the community and the push that we get from everyone in a positive way. This sort of backdrop of very knowledgeable, very nice people who have invited us into this world. That's
Yeah.
amazing. That's
Yeah.
amazing. I can't think of another fandom that is as positive, has the least amount of drama. I'm sure there's people out there with drama, but we don't play with that world. We are interested in creating together, understanding what we're all bringing to this game, right? So that's why I try to keep in touch with like people who are just starting off into this world and into the Mythic Legions, and encourage them and understand that we're all at a different level in our ability to create art, but we're all creating art, and we're doing it in a way that allows us to teach the people who are coming right up behind us, be supportive of one another, as Oz says here,
Yeah.
um, have a place to sort of test out dumb things. There's so many times when I come up with something really dumb, and it winds up inspiring something else that is just quite good. I don't, there's the silliness and the silly stuff that I do that I bounce off of you guys, or when I remember when I started deconstructing all these heads, right? I tried to
Yeah.
take apart one of every type of Mythic Legion's head to see what the actual base pieces were made of, and you'd be surprised at how some of them break down. And if you guys haven't done that or haven't done it yourself, back in my feed there are some breakdowns or blowouts of all of the heads that I've had the guts to take apart. So, taking that apart and just figuring out that an orc jaw can
Hmm.
fit very easily with very little slicey dicey right onto the upper part of a goblin. And I looked at him and I was like, that's Grandpa Goblin. And I've had him in my head for months now. And, I happened across a clearance Star Wars dude that I don't remember his name. And I'm like, boom, that's a guy, that's a character. And there's a story there. And he is a crotchety old
Yeah,
guy. And he
yeah,
does want the kids to get off his lawn because he has done his adventuring and he's done with that. Now he just wants to hang out, take his little walks with his little backpack and, do whatever he does. But that's the joy and the love that I find in it. I mean,
absolutely.
as soon as I saw those 3D sculpts, as soon as I saw Hongo, I knew. I was like, this is it, man. This
Yeah,
is where I have to do the best possible job to bring what's in my head out, right? Because I saw it and I'm like, I get it. I get this head. Jason Demon Customs with that sculpt work, and Bear Anthony with the print and the quality of this print. It blows my mind. I can't wait to see. I mean, I've seen many great ones. I can't wait to see what everybody else is doing. I know that you're working on one, and
yeah.
I'm
Mine's
super excited for it. But it just juiced up my creativity whenever I see this stuff that people are making. Yes. Oh, that's
it's
fantastic.
it's
It's
still
kind of
very
like
based.
yeah, no, I get it. Yeah, yeah, you still got some work to do, but it's what's the Street Fighter guy? Those colors.
Oh,
Blanca.
Blanca. Yeah,
Yeah, it's got that sort of the color palette, and I love that. That's so
yeah,
cool with the orange. I can't wait. And that's what's really cool is that we can all interpret these things in our own ways and whatever fuels our imagination. Yours may be
yeah,
completely different. I looked at this guy and I'm like, I don't think everybody knows he's a pretty chill dude. But I
yeah,
looked at him and I was like, I'm like Buddhist monk or mindfulness guy or just a guy who's hanging out at one with nature, sort of that Sandman, the Green,
hmm,
Swamp Thing sort of love in there, and like throwing in that Henson stuff, a little bit of Labyrinth and Princess Bride swampiness. Oh, I love it.
yeah. He's like somewhere between like in my mine, because like you said, as I work on them, I
Mm-hmm.
have to make up a story. I have to work on a background, a character for them. Which is why I'm probably not going to be selling too many of the things I do
Yeah.
unless it's just for that reason. Even then, I probably won't want to do it. But in my mind, as I'm painting him, it's a little bit of the dude from The Big Lebowski meets Ludo from Labyrinth,
Yep.
and all the stuff you were just saying, like the connection to the earth and everything, and
Yeah.
it's really cool. I wanted to bring this comment up that Masters Maniac Mexico posted. Um, you were talking
Yeah.
about the yeah, and I think I totally agree with that because like you get fantasy, whether it's sci-fi fantasy or medieval fantasy or whatever it is, like there are no limits.
Mm-hmm.
Like I know within the Mythic Legions community, like people talk a lot about how they think that the Cosmic Legions have the doors are wide open, you can do anything with it.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like I still feel that way about Mythic Legions. Like I think yeah, okay, if we're limited to the one world of mythos, like but there's portals to other realities, like the whole concept of World of Warcraft. You've got the orcs came from another plane and all that stuff,
Mm-hmm.
and D&D has it. There's all the different planes and realms. So like, there's ways to bring other stuff in. Um, I think medieval fantasy like that is just as broad and wide a spectrum as the Cosmic Legions can be. I mean, they've already been doing it for what 8 years, I think, or so.
Mm-hmm.
The Mythic Legions, and they're
I
just
honestly don't know.
I think I saw something like they're just scratching the surface of like how they want to get to it, and I'm like, that's really exciting for me.
Well,
Um,
some of the updated tooling that they can do now, some of the new stuff they can do with parts and with parts of parts. Like, Lynn was posting last week about the new leather torsos
yeah,
being plate based. We can take them apart. Oh my goodness! Now, I don't have to worry about if that custom torso is going to have a great fit, or if I'm going to need to, do the old super glue trick with an arm and till it tightens
right.
up. You know, don't get me wrong, I still love these custom torsos, but it is a hard thing to get right and to get to stay in place in some cases. Having access to use that as a base for 3D printed parts is absolutely genius, and it just goes to show that that level of interplay between the company and the guys who are working with it. If folks had this kind of relationship with a company like Games Workshop, what do you think? Where do you think Warhammer would be today? I think you would have a lot more happy, less frustrated customers if they embraced the secondary creators or however you want to label that. The DIY guys who are doing stuff with 3D print. If you embrace that, which Mythic Legions and the Horsemen have done, then you build a community unlike anything I've ever seen before. I mean, imagine if Todd were doing that, right? If this buck system were interchangeable, there's some amazing technology going on in some of those things. And if they were a little easier to batch together, or if there was a system to it that, was a little more custom friendly, he kind of started going there with the artist proofs, the grayscale figures that he had that you can paint, which are really nice.
Yeah.
But they're chase figures. In some cases they're more expensive than the painted version. To me, that kind of seems like that's a lost opportunity. If you correctly market this stuff, this kind of intersecting in with these creators online, like the folks at Legions and the Horsemen have done. You're creating a market that didn't exist before, right?
Yeah.
So I love it.
Yeah.
I love that there's this relationship between the simple fact that I went to a con last year, and three of my like heroes since the 90s and the Horsemen that were there were the guys that packed up my bags and boxes and wrung me out and took my cash. Can you imagine that from any other toy company?
Yeah.
I've seen.
Yeah.
Yeah. It is insane. It's a nuts concept to be this close, and it's exactly what this community has needed. Back in the old days, you would trade fodder ideas on the forums, the Fush forums, or oh god, there's a My Action Figures or something like that. There's a couple of old school custom sites out there,
Okay.
and it was really hard to communicate. But we're getting top-down communication from this company about the things that we can do. Giving direction to 3D printers as they've done, which is very loose and open compared to anything else that involves IP and nerddom.
Well, and the fact that the 3D printers and like the secondary parts market people they ask for it.
Yeah.
They're like, hey, we want to support you and we want to further this. We want to do our own thing, but we don't want to cross any of your lines. Give us guidelines. I think that was really cool. Brian, this group is great. I know I've said this before on the show with people, but I went with my friend Sean. I had a couple figures, and just seeing that show last year, I had no idea. I wasn't in the Cabal. I wasn't in any of the groups yet, but just seeing how much of it was not for sale. It was just people showing off, not in a like braggy way. Like
you want to look at it. Yeah.
Yeah. It
like
was
cool
an exhibition. Yeah.
Probably, and meeting everyone was fantastic, but I had so many good conversations with so many folks there. But hanging out with Patrick Boyle, because Patrick Boyle's imagination is a lot like mine. He's got a kind of a whimsical charm to him, and he's an amazing artist. But the whimsical charm that he brings to his creations, same with Jeremy. That's the stuff that kind of lights me up right now. Don't get me wrong, I love the sword and sorcery and the big barbarians 80s style stuff that people are doing. That stuff is great, but once in a while I just like that weird little whimsical, goofy, slightly off sort of stuff. And one of us. And, just hanging out with Patrick. And the thing is, I know that I was within spitting distance of you, because I've seen pictures of you online, and I didn't even know who the heck you were. And so many people that I've had the opportunity to meet over this last, oh my goodness, it has been almost not quite a year, but 9 months since going to that con and putting names to faces and building relationships with, you and Anthony and Nikki, and some of the things that I see, these groups of folks putting stuff together. Emil and sort of his ragtag group,
Yeah.
and it's just beautiful. I love all of the creativity. I love seeing what you guys are doing. I love the new, fresh, weird ideas. This is the community. This is the tribe that I think I've been looking for my entire life.
I
And it's more than just action figures, guys. This is real
yeah.
life stuff. We're building friendships. We're building community here, where we have an opportunity to be better people in general. I think I am on my best behavior when I'm talking to other Legions fans. Now, don't get me wrong. Once we get to know each other, I know how far I can cut loose with someone. But I
Right.
also I also want to always be welcoming and supportive. Oh, thank you, Patrick. I appreciate that. It was a blast talking to you, Willa Tom, Brian Sanderson, um, all of that stuff, man. It was just a super blast. And I'll be honest, when I was heading out for Legions Con, I was terrified. I am terrified of public places with lots of people in a close proximity, which is probably why I spent 7 years in theater. Why did I do that
Okay.
when I'm terrified of crowds? Well, I'm part of it was trying to get over that. But I was terrified. But the second I walked in the door and I saw, walked in the door and saw a bunch of toys, made my way back towards where the horsemen were, and boom, there's Jeremy, there's Nikki, there's Walt, there's all of and other folks that were there, Detour Customs, and how welcoming they all were to me, and how friendly they were. And they didn't have to be. They didn't have to be there being these ambassadors. But when your toy brand creates such a community in which that the creators and the unpaid brand ambassadors are really the leadership, right? And when they show us that kind of love and respect and sort of nurturing and bringing us in and dealing with our dumb questions, um, that is bigger than toys. That is how we should always be treating each other all the time.
Yeah.
And it inspired me, and that's why I've become more involved with Instagram and showing my stuff and getting better as a painter at the same time, and getting better as a customizer at the same time. It's this responsibility I feel I have to like bring the next guy on and to help out the guy who's got questions. I want to. That's the reason I put up tips and tricks and goofy stuff and experiments that I do, is because you know what? That's the stuff that turns me on. Whenever you guys are putting out your stuff, or teaching me a new way to do to paint or sculpt or whatever it is, yeah, it's incredible, and we have to carry that forward. It is our responsibility.
Yeah. Let's see. Masters Maniac Mexico. The group, there is a Facebook group called Mythic Legions Cabal. It's specifically about Mythic Legions and the Four Horsemen toys. Um, I'm sure. I mean, I think there's some questions you got to ask. I don't remember what the things are, but if you look for either of us on Instagram, just shelve it, just .shelve.it, and Danny is at Riverswift Icon. I
Or
think I
Riverswift
gotta get that
Icon,
right.
which somehow
Swift.
I picked that name. Well, Riverswift wasn't available,
Okay.
and so I'm like, I always do some variation of that or other things. But that was one of the and I was like, well, Riverswift Icon, because I like Transformers.
I can't believe
I didn't,
my
and
whole
my wife was telling me, she was like, "Oh, this is your Instagram, Riverswift Icon?" And I'm like, "Icon, really? It's a little presumptuous. I didn't mean for that, guys. I'm sorry, but at least I'm a hair icon, right?" What is your hair regimen, Jesse? I know you have beautiful curly hair like mine.
uh shampoo and condition every day.
Yeah,
Yeah.
well, one thing I did learn is I only shampoo
Take
like
care,
once.
Curtis. Have a great night.
Hey,
Catch you in
Curtis,
the
it's
next
good to see
episode.
you. Thanks for listening to us shenanigans. Shenanigans.
Um, Oz, if no one can post if someone can post a link to the Facebook group in the chat, that would be great. If not, I'll post it in the description later. I think in my Mythic Minute for the Cabal, I might have shared it, but maybe I didn't. Yeah. Um,
Michael
Yeah,
Gasper. That is
yeah,
such a great point.
that's
Well,
150% accurate.
we talked about this before in that Mythos is a multiverse, and we're all creating it at
Yeah,
the same time.
yeah,
One of the things that as I've gotten older, is I've let go of a lot of like uh, my preconceived notions of what things should be like. Right? I think I had my bubble burst with the Last Jedi, but after that, everything else that they could do to characters was kind of like, it's not so bad. Actually, no, that's not true. After that, I began to realize though that everybody has a different vision of what they think something should be like, and they remember things differently, right?
yeah,
You and I probably remember the Claremont run of X-Men very differently. I always go back to Scott and Jean and the heartbreak and the love, and but then as an older person, I go back and I'm like, Scott's a complete ass. He left his family. He did these horrible things, and Scott is my favorite character in the X-Men. By far, he's the most interesting one. Partially because of his flaws, but at the same time, this guy's a real jerk. And he's done some really
yeah,
jerky things. But everybody has a different take on that, and there were a lot of complaints about Revelation when it came out, Master Universe Revelation when it came out. Right? You guys do realize the show that we were watching in the '80s about a guy in a fur Speedo who gets his powers from a magical rainbow and walks around and hangs out with a bunch of other guys in fur Speedos is kind of a ridiculous concept, right? But there was so much pushback on the stuff that Kevin Smith was doing with Revelation. I got my own problems with Kevin Smith and what he did with the Viewer's Universe. But I love his brain. I love the fact that we can have a guy like that exists and has that brain. And his take on it added something to the dialogue in a positive way. And I know a lot of people have problems with it, but that was about the time where I started saying, you know what? We can have different takes. We can do different things, and we can enjoy the things that we enjoy. We don't have to cause friction with other people who enjoy things or don't enjoy things the way
yeah,
that we do. And so, when you think about a character like Batman, right? This is the most pliant character in the history of fiction. You can have a Batman that is super campy Adam West, and if that's your Batman, and the older I get, the more Adam West becomes my Batman. Um, that's great. If dark, gritty, weirdly, almost when he gets into the later Frank Miller sequels, racist and weird Batman,
oh
that
yeah,
that is also a valid take on that character. Batman is just a French fry that you put different condiments on, and tell
sure,
stories with. And that's when you start to think about that. And we can have weird, odd takes. People are like, "Oh, I hate Batfleck." I'm sorry, but I've been wanting like a 40-something, tired, worn out Batman for a long time. Was it done necessarily the best way that I would do it? Nope. But that's not Batfleck's fault. And people gave him so much crap for that. And I'm like, oh, he's cute. He's great. He
right.
opened up my imagination to what a world with a 40-year-old Batman could look like. Oh, I think Jesse, you're cutting out there.
Oh, am I? How's that now?
Oh, yep.
It kind of
You're
got
syncing up.
squishy there for a minute. Um, no, I'm with you. I think I'm not trying to say I'm a very flawed person, but just the
Sure.
way I grew up, I was like you were talking about the outsider characters, and that's what drew me to the X-Men initially. Um, I've like at school I didn't fit in because I like comics and I went to church. At church I didn't
Mhm.
fit in because I like comics and like weird stuff, and it was always just it never quite fit in. Like you said, this is the tribe I've been looking for my whole life. I told Jeremy, I was like, finding the Cabal was like my cheers. Like it's something I've always wanted. Like I felt welcome and invited in parts of things before, but not like this. And um, like Batman, I remember, you know, I wasn't paying enough attention to stuff when I was a kid and early teens when the Schumacher Batmans came out. So I didn't like have a lot of opinions going into the movies about the actors. But when Christian Bale got cast, everybody was like, "What, Christian Bale? He's British." Like, "Oh, it's going to be horrible." And they're not my favorite, but I know that's like the definitive Batman movies to some people. Like they said Ben Affleck, I'm like, he's a good actor. I mean, do I like everything he does? No. Doesn't mean I won't like this. I thought he was great. I liked that take on the character, except for all the guns.
It was a little
Um,
weird.
but I liked seeing, like you said, that older kind of worn out, and I liked introducing him kind of towards the end of his run and Superman just getting started. Like there's a lot of great potential in that universe that I think got wasted, but that's a different show for another day. Um, uh, but just growing up that way, like I know, all right, not everybody, like I got picked on a lot in school and stuff. I'm not trying for sympathy here, but like,
No, I think a lot of us here can say the same thing. I know
and
that there's a thread.
I just, I just kept going. My mom, just the way she raised me, and it's like I'm not gonna not like what I like, and if I get made fun of or whatever, like I still have the stuff I like, and I
Mhm.
feel like that same thing with all of this. It's like, yeah, I loved Revelation. I had a couple technical issues with it, just same like I loved Obi-Wan. I think they made a couple of mistakes in Obi-Wan, but overall, I loved it. Like
Right.
I'd rather have things that have a few things I dislike than not get more new Star Wars.
Yeah. I mean,
Um,
I don't want to see. I don't mind a couple of misses if they're embedded in a string of wins, right? So do something different, do something fun and interesting with the character. I have no desire to watch the Harley Quinn animated show, right? It's not what I care about. But will I go on HBO Max and watch all of Doom Patrol? Yeah, it's great. Are you kidding me? But somebody else might not like Doom Patrol. But me, I'm like, oh my God, Brandon Fraser, give me the feels and all of that. And having weird takes on things. You have Titans, right? Which is it's cheesecake, and it's not great. But probably somebody out there really likes that take of Nightwing and Robin and Red
yeah,
Hood and all that. And you know what? I'm happy that it exists because it gives us more things. And you know, it's going to raise all the ships, right? So the tide raises all ships. And I think we've seen that from the beginnings where you had the Raimi verse, which and the X-Men. I know that we both have problems with those movies and with the creators of those movies. Um,
what movies? There's no
yeah,
X-Men
exactly.
movies.
Well, although yeah. It's kind of like you remember that they talked about making a Green Lantern movie once, and I was thinking to myself, because I mean, I don't know if any of you guys know that. There's my Black Lantern shirt, but I'm a gigantic, weird Green Lantern fan. Been collecting Green Lantern stuff for like 40 years. I probably have hundreds of Green Lantern action figures. Hundreds. Um, I know I have every Green Lantern action figure that's ever been made so far. Even Todd's with the trigger fingers. Thanks, Todd. Hal Jordan needs trigger fingers. John Stewart, sure. He uses a lot of guns. He's a military guy.
Sure.
Why does Hal Jordan need trigger fingers? Maybe he had like
Why don't
joystick gripping fingers.
why
But
don't Star Wars Black Series troopers come with trigger figures on both hands?
there are no left-handed
Sorry.
troopers.
Some occasionally they'll get one that has, if they come with dual pistols, they'll get it,
Yeah.
but not everybody does. So I always have to take a razor blade and like slice. It's easy enough to do, but it's like,
Yeah.
sorry. Yes.
Yeah, and I'm this huge Green Lantern fan, and I heard one time they were gonna make a movie, and that Mark Strong was gonna play Sinestro, and that is like the best casting rumor I've ever heard because Mark Strong looks like Sinestro. You go back and watch Kick Ass, and you're like, oh
Yeah.
yeah, I could see him as a Sinestro. Yeah, somebody mentioned they could have put Ryan Reynolds in there. It's a bold choice, I would personally have put Ryan Reynolds in a Guy Gardner role. I think he would have been
Mm.
Guy Gardner. I still think he'd be a great Guy Gardner.
I mean, if you
At the
do Ryan
time,
Reynolds, you got to
yeah.
throw Taika Waititi in as like his
Oh my
nerdy
God,
best
yeah,
buddy.
slightly racist character, or at least
Yeah.
they handled that was one thing they handled very well in the movie, right? In the comics, that character is a racist stereotype, and it's really sad. And they updated him with the here's another problematic person, Jeff Johns run, to be a lot more user friendly and a little more updated. But yeah, and I think they did a great job with stuff like the Taika Waititi in that movie they were thinking about making. But I'm really glad they never did.
Yeah.
I did, however, and I do fully recommend the 2 Green Lantern animated movies. They're super fun.
Okay.
And one of them has Nathan Fillion as Green Lantern, which is who I always wanted as my Hal Jordan. Still do. I would take him at this age as a Hal Jordan any day of the week. Why can't we have an older Hal Jordan? Remember, he used to have gray hair on the sides, back in the 80s?
Yeah.
So, yeah, why not give me a little older Hal Jordan? I just want Nathan Fillion done right as a superhero somewhere.
Yeah. Yeah, he deserves it. He's great.
Yeah, maybe one day when they do make a Green Lantern movie, we can have him as like the elder statesman, or maybe he can play Kilowatt.
Yeah.
CG.
Okay. I mean, he played a very similar shaped character in Guardians of the Galaxy, so.
Indeed. And we know he's got the chops. He can literally just remove his arms. We saw that movie, the Suicide Squads, where he played the arm TDK.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're talking about just trying something different, like
James Gunn.
What James Gunn did with that movie compared to what the first one was. Again, different podcast for a different day or whatever, but like he the way, spoiler if no one has watched the newer The Suicide Squad from last year, the year before, whenever that came out, that whole misdirect at the beginning was fantastic.
Beautiful misdirect. They did a great job with the teasers, all of that.
Yeah, it was so good. And like, that's a team that you can do something that weird with, and it works. Yeah.
Well, I think that your guys like that, guys like that can fix what DC broke when they were trying to do the extended universe. Bringing in some sort of weird, fresh, new ideas can differentiate itself, I think, from the MCU, which is super tight continuity. Everything leads into everything else, which is great and wonderful, and they're good at that. But DC can just be art house weird stuff, You can have Peacemaker. Yeah. Peacemaker, I'm like, not only, Peacemaker had one of the most touching stories in a weird way. The relationships were very, very real, very Kevin Smith-ish.
The show.
On the Peacemaker show, right?
Yeah.
You were exploring some pretty heavy concepts about, parental abuse and sins of the father. Yeah, exactly. Oz is talking about it here. And, the stuff with his dad and with Robert Patrick, who plays a literal Ku Klux Klan Grand Dragon superhero. That's the kind of chance taking that Marvel can't do. They can't do it. You cannot put that show on Disney Plus. I'm sorry. You can put other movies from other genres, but the MCU is never going to hold that. The closest we're ever going to get is Deadpool, and who knows what that's going to look like in the MCU, if it ever even is in the MCU. Yeah. But there's the chance taking stuff. Peacemaker is, it reminds me a lot of like a very dirty Scrubs, in that it portrays male relationships in a positive way and men exploring their feelings in a and sort of that swallowing the machismo that we've been taught.
With some of the most machismo characters ever on screen.
Oh yeah. And thank the maker for John Cena, who's willing to take a chance like that with a show like that, with the heart he's got. He's a big-hearted, sweetheart of a guy, right? And the fact that, he can do this show and bring so much heart to a character that is revolting on its premise, right?
Yeah.
And in the beginning of the show, he's a very revolting human being. And he's still fairly revolting by the end, but you see growth. Yeah. And, if you don't have, because you can say that show didn't necessarily have the biggest, deepest plot, right? It was MacGuffin, it was do the thing, it was beat the bad guys. But, there's two sort of writing styles right, and that's doing character work and where the character progresses through the story, and then you have plot, right? And plot can be important or not important depending on where you're focusing stuff. And plot wasn't important to that show, but it had so much character development and growth in a silly DC show about a guy who hangs out with an eagle whose dad is a plan wizard, literally with an
Yeah.
interdimensional space portal. Yeah. Give me weird,
Yeah.
funky stuff that can explore that kind of relationship, and give you that kind of character growth. I'll take it.
Yeah, absolutely. Have you watched Ted Lasso?
I have. It's just a masterpiece and of storytelling and of character development.
Yeah,
Absolutely love it.
spoiler alert for anyone who hasn't watched it. I won't get into specific details, but if you've seen it, I'm rewatching it with a friend. It's like my third or fourth time through the show. Um, when they get beat by Manchester City, and Jamie's dad comes into the locker room
Mm-hmm.
and has that confrontation with him, and and then you can see Jamie, who with his character, like that real macho all-star player character, where he's at, and then that Roy, the retired,
Mm-hmm.
you know, uh, veteran of the game, like comes, he just walks over and hugs him. It's just like, it was such a powerful moment when I saw it, and watching it again today was just, and the whole subplot. You have seen both seasons, right?
Yeah, I've seen. I'm completely up
Okay.
to date. Yeah.
So the whole plot with like Ted and like his panic attacks and stuff, which is something
Mm-hmm.
I've dealt with, and Curtis and I talked about some of this stuff last week. Um, I felt that show really hit the nail on the head for how I like it portrayed how I kind of feel and experience those things,
Mm-hmm.
and dealing with that, and how he kind of gets outed about that during the show, just as being like a thing to get outed about. It's like, no, he's struggling with something that's normal, and
Yeah.
it shouldn't be an outing situation. It's like, oh, good, let's get him some help. Let's encourage him. So I don't know where it's going with all, but just yeah, how a show like Peacemaker, who I hated that, like enjoyed watching him in the
Mm-hmm.
movie, horrible character, and I was like, why are they making a show out of this guy? What could they possibly do to make me enjoy 8 episodes of him? And they did it.
Oh, absolutely.
They did it.
And
Yeah,
and you go back to that whole like exploration of hey, thanks Brian, we appreciate it, man. Our beards are
yeah,
amazing. About this time every year I start growing it out because we have a big my coworker has a big Halloween party every year, and I always have these epic illusions in my head about what I'm gonna be. But I'm like, all right, it's almost August, I gotta stop shaving. I may do a character with a beard, I may not. I always have a beard, but it's not always so. But now in my head is Watiti's Blackbeard and his look, and trying to play into the pirate thing a little more this year. I've never done a pirate, guys. I'm not really. I don't.
awesome.
Here's a secret. I only watched the Pirates of the Caribbean movie last year for the first time, and the only reason I watched them is because I was doing a lot of pirate customs, and I was like, I need some
Okay.
inspiration. And don't get me wrong, they're fantastic movies. It's just not something I would really be that into. And I don't know anything about pirates, but I do love that show especially. And yes, it's a very queer show, and it never it never needs to go there, and it's beautiful in a way because it just portrays these folks and their relationships as completely normal. Never has to use any language surrounding it. And on that show, there are many, many very positive male relationships that are not of a homosexual nature. Again, they don't
Yeah,
even bring it up in the show; it just exists. But that show and its positivity and sort of turning things on our expectations on its head about what a pirate show can be, and while kind of holding true to the way that things could be on a pirate ship. Um, Again, just another beautiful workplace comedy like a Scrubs,
yeah,
that just happens to be about pirates. And Taika Waititi's eye and his look as his version of Blackbeard, I'm like, oh man, he's like a heavy metal Blackbeard with like a leather motorcycle jacket. I've got one upstairs that I bought to do I bought it to do my Negan costume,
Okay.
and I used it. I used it for Negan. I used it for Lemmy from Motorhead,
Okay.
where I put his wart on. Right, it was a pistachio shell and some paint, acrylic paint, and I got it on
Nice.
there, and I had his little wart out of half a pistachio shell. But yeah, so it's that time of year where I'm trying to figure out if I'm going to do a bearded character or not. So we'll see.
Nice. Yeah, I'm about 6 episodes into that show, and I just saw that What We Do in the Shadows came back last week, so I
Yeah.
got to get caught up on that. And pirate, yeah, there's so few good pirate things out there. Like most of the stuff for me, pirate wise, growing up was like the old like
Oh
Errol
yeah.
Flynn, that classic swashbuckling stuff. Yul Brynner, um, some of those great, old movies. Then there was what was it? There was the one with Gina Davis. Was it just called
Oh
Pirates?
yes.
And
What
I think
was that
Matthew
movie?
Modine.
Matthew Modine and Gina Davis. Oh my goodness, that was a good. I can't remember the name of it, but
Like
that
I
one was good.
rewatched it.
It was sort of like Treasure Island, kind of a name like that or something. Um,
Yeah,
but yeah,
Pirate Island. Was it Pirate Island?
something like that. I'm not
It
certain,
was.
but
It
that
was very
that one was
generic.
fun. And
I tried. I need to give it another shot, but I tried watching it like 10, 15 years ago when I found the DVD for like $5. I was like, oh man, this movie does not does not hold up.
no,
Um,
and a lot of that stuff, it doesn't. But I kind of mix in different things like in my head as far as pirates. I throw in my Nemos and Cutthroat Island. That's it. I knew it was
yeah,
something like that. I throw in Nemo. Princess Bride to me is a bit of a pirate movie, which
sure.
has one of the greatest sword fighting scenes in the history
Oh
of
yeah,
movies. They went full Errol Flynn. The fact that they were both fighting left-handed for the first half of the fight is mind-blowing and doing it fairly well. You can watch it now that you know they're fighting left-handed. You can see the flaws and the edits that had to be made. But
yeah,
my goodness, that was just a super fun, you know, swashbuckling lightsaber fight, sword fight,
yeah.
which we hadn't seen a lot of, coming out of Star Wars, where it was more of the samurai style fighting until flipping Yoda came along and
Yeah.
happened.
Have you watched Black Sails? I have not.
That's a sexy show. Yeah, I've watched the first season and I think most of the second season. I'm not completely caught up, but
Okay.
that's a show that kind of Game of Thronesifies that world. There's a lot of sex on it. It's great. It's a wonderful show. I think that it had a lot of filler in it. It probably could have
Okay.
been tightened up a little more, like a lot of those sort of shows, like Walking Dead, or a lot of the genre shows where you know there is a lot of filler that isn't fun filler, like Star Trek filler. So
Yeah. Like I don't mind filler if it goes somewhere eventually, but like I don't need an episode count. I'd rather have a shorter season
right, any day
that
of the week.
delivers good stuff. Yeah, like
I mean,
yeah,
you imagine if Walking Dead were 10 episodes a year. What
yeah,
kind of great storytelling could you do with that kind of a constraint? I understand they
yeah,
spent so much money on set work and the actors and everything that they have to juice it and get all they can out of it. But imagine the storytelling you could have done with that show at 10 episodes a season instead of spending 10 episodes at the prison or 20 or however many they were.
yeah,
Not to criticize, not to be critical, but there's something to be said about working with constraints and working in a brief way, and doing stuff. Less is more in some cases.
absolutely. So on the pirate theme, have you read or listened to the audiobook of the Michael Crichton Pirate Latitudes?
I have not. I have not. The only Crichton book I ever read, I did a book report on Sphere in like 10th
Oh
or
wow.
11th grade.
Okay.
Excellent, beautiful book. I keep meaning to go back and reading the Omega Strain. Jurassic Park doesn't interest me as a book. It's just not my kind of sci-fi. It is cool. Don't get me wrong. I think the movies are amazing. I just haven't really given him the type of chance that I should. I like my sci-fi a little more. spacey, you know.
Okay.
But yeah, no,
Um,
it's
he's probably, if I had to pick like a singular favorite writer after the writer of the Prydain Chronicles, um, it would probably be him, just because I between like that, the Jurassic Park and Lost World, which are so different from the movies, like
mhm,
it's definitely more focused on the science going wrong and our abuse of science or misunderstanding of science, rather than just, oh, there's monsters, you know.
right.
um Sphere was great. That was one of the few books I've read pretty much in one sitting.
And
um
Spear was so weird and
yeah,
other, you know,
yeah.
Alien. I loved it. It gave me that same feeling as Alien or The Abyss, or you know those old Richard Matheson. They did the movie with Will Smith, I Am Legend.
Oh
You
yeah,
know,
yeah, yeah, yeah,
that
yeah.
sort of like super funky weird stuff. Oh, I love that's the kind of sci-fi that really does eat me up. I do need to give Crichton like the big bucket list listen that I need to give it. Yeah, just
I
haven't
would say
gotten it
maybe give Next a try.
yet. Next, was that
Yeah.
that wasn't the timeline when time thing was time
No, that's Timeline, where they go back
timeline. Oh,
to
that's right.
medieval France. No,
Right. Next.
Next is it's kind of weird because it's just a series of like random stories, and it's like corporations, you know, you go in, you're getting blood treatment for cancer, and
Mhm.
they now own your blood. So it's like all these weird things that are like, and this book was written years ago, and it's like it was kind of like fringing on stuff that we might, I feel like we're kind of seeing some versions of those.
Oh yeah, no, we're seeing that stuff now. You know, you
It's
think about genetic engineering and food, right? You know,
yeah,
all it takes is one corporately farmed soybean getting somehow mixed into some, you know, planters or normal farmers sort of crop to have a gigantic lawsuit on their hands if they go in and test it and
yep,
find they're genetically, and it happens now. So, you know, we're
yeah.
seeing that stuff. We're going to start seeing, you know, the healthcare industry kind of going in that direction as well. So it's scary stuff. And I mean, that's always the great thing about science fiction and fantasy is it's us exploring what we can and what we can do and whether we should do it.
Yeah,
And I think that's the lens that I like to view the world through because it's awful, you know, in a lot of cases, the reality. And what fantasy, what good sci-fi, what good horror allows us to do is to look at those things with of enough of a view away from it or a filter to allow us to understand like these deep, complex societal, structural, healthcare, weird things, and understand the problems of what we can get into going down that road. That's far more interesting to me than actually watching the thing on television. I don't like to watch violent things. You know, my wife,
right.
my wife watches a lot of true crime, you know, reenactments and stuff like that, and there are times when I have to leave the room. I can sit there and watch the most brutal horror, as you know, again, as long as it isn't sadistic and it's crafted in a
Yeah,
way that focuses that lens on something that we need to explore. But I can look at that stuff all day long because it's fictional. I know that, but yeah, once you start getting into reenactments or like we were watching The Staircase with Toni Collette, who's literally one of the greatest actresses that ever lived.
she's great.
She's amazing, but that is a heart wrenching movie to or show to watch because she does portray that possibly abused woman in such a manner that it's just horrifying to me. I hate violence in general, which is why I love weird swordsmen like Drizzt who cut up 1,000 orcs or whatever. Um, but it's fictional, you know. I can get away
Yeah,
with that.
yeah,
But you know, yeah. Give me a good dose of that lens distortion you get from fiction, and yeah, that's kind of how I want to explore the world. You know.
yeah. I'm with you. Yeah, the true crime stuff, like there's a point where like it starts to get interesting, and then I just hear a couple more things. I'm like, all right, nope, I don't,
Nope.
like, I know
Yeah.
that's real and I can't ignore reality, but like we've got, yeah,
We've got a billion other things to do with our time, also. You
yeah.
know.
All
All
right,
right,
Michael,
Michael.
thanks for
Thanks.
joining. Looking forward to the layer this week.
Yeah, but that's I want to get away from that stuff. I work 8 hours a day in a world that's techie and slightly politically driven. Um, I have to put on the customer service face and things like that when I'm dealing with folks. But when I get out of work every day, the last thing I want to do is go home and read about how terrible the world is. I mean, yeah, I'll get my digest version of that now because I want to know what's happening in the world.
Right.
But I'm not going to sit there and just consume doom and gloom all night when I can hang out with you guys or paint or listen to a book that's going to inspire me to do something.
Yeah.
For me, that's it's a choice. We only have so much time in the world, and yeah, as geeks and nerds, we have more options than a lot of people.
Yeah.
We really
Yeah.
do because we're willing
Like
to take bigger chances in what we'll consume for content.
yeah, absolutely. And like you were saying earlier with the learning and growing and like mentoring and learning and passing out like from different people with like the different skill sets between, the painting and the different 3D stuff or, writing, drawing, whatever the different things are,
Mm-hmm.
being able to feel comfortable sharing that and it's like my apartment is full of stuff.
Yeah,
But my favorite thing is when people come over and they just look at it. It's like going through a museum. Like it makes me happy and I feed off of it creatively, but I love when other people get to come experience, not because it's my stuff and it's like showing off, but like,
yeah. No, but
you
but but
know,
no, it's having somebody else understand what makes you tick, right? And sometimes we're
yeah,
not great as humans at expressing that to people. you know, I'm at the point now where I can comfortably talk about painting action figures with my super conservative boss, right? Who, he's your golfer, motorcycle rider, watches the footballs, all that thing, right? So,
sure.
we're both process guys, so that's what we talk about. But and he knows that I like action figures and stuff, but now I can show him, I feel comfortable and say, hey, what I did this weekend. Look at this really cool, like, stuff that I was making or mix of paints that I used to make a stain or whatever. Excuse me. And as a draftsman, he can kind of understand and relate to that. But talking about that stuff with normal people, it used to be hard. And now I find that, what, I wear my freak flag more often and people seem to respond to it. And I think that parts of society are more accepting than they were when we were kids. A lot of parts of society are.
Yeah.
Yeah, we've got some backswing on that pendulum, and it's coming around right now. But that's okay. We've been here before. We'll get through this too.
Yeah.
We lived in a world where Gene Roddenberry showing a black woman kissing on television was just just mind-blowingly unbelievable. We lived through a world where all of these horrible things we've done societally. We've gotten through those. We'll get through this stuff too, and that's, I think, what's important is to understand that, like, if we can surround ourselves with folks like you and me, if we can communicate the way that you and I can, we can break down all of that awfulness and pivoting and calling everybody out and you know let people be who they want to be, whether that's on this side or on that side. Be who you want to be and don't hurt anybody. That's really the golden rule. It's still the thing I live by.
Yeah.
Whether that come from my family bringing, or from reading comic books, which I think inspired a lot of my morality. Is your Peter Parker out there doing what he can, because he's supposed to, because he has that ability he has that power and responsibility.
Yeah. Jacob's asking if we
Yeah,
feel like that's been a recent change, last 5 years ish, letting the figure flag fly, or free. Not sure. I,
yeah. The freak flag about action figures, I think he's trying to say. Yeah, like we
about
can.
action figures.
Yeah,
Yeah. Good.
yeah. I think so, and I think a lot of it is due to the beanie babies of the toy industry, pops, which they have their place. They're a little. It's a lot to deal with, but I think that between pops and Super 7 and its reaction figures and the nostalgia wave that's been currently hitting through, stuff like Stranger Things, um, sort of that synth wave sound that people are
Mhm.
embracing, that 80s throwback stuff, John Carpenter type stuff. I think that that nostalgia is feeding into it a lot. And when we were sort of the ones that were doing this, and my workplace, full of I'm a grown man with an adult job, right? And I may see important people, but I've always had a few action figures or a lot of action figures in my cube or on my wall or in my office when I have that in office, and it's a conversation starter. But I think that the folks now who are seeing these pops or seeing the reaction figures, this sort of like mainstreamness and mainstreaming of toys is starting to happen. You look at
Well, yeah.
you look at GameStop, you look at so a lot of the retail spaces where trend right is what we used to call toys and figures and stuff that has a high margin, that you can sell at retail and bring people in the door. That sort of presence has made it okay as well, I think.
Yeah, I agree. I
Hey, Jay.
think Stranger Things had a huge impact. Jay,
Mhm.
welcome. Um, Stranger Things for sure. The pops definitely.
Mhm.
Um, I think so many other things have become more mainstream, and I don't have any regret or like, oh, I was here first. This is my thing. You made fun of me. You don't get to be like. That's
No,
never been a
please,
thing for
please
me.
come along with us. Have
Yeah,
the
it's like
fun that
cool.
we're having.
Yes,
Yeah,
yeah. I mean, you love X-Men. So many people love X-Men because of the '90s cartoon, and I don't like that '90s cartoon. I
sure.
absolutely
No, it's hard to
cannot
go back
stand
and
it.
watch it now. I mean, as an adult, we go back and watch some of this stuff that we used to watch when we were kids. Honestly, the only thing that holds up is Batman the Animated Series because it was just so well done. And I'm not
And
even that big of a fan of Batman the Animated Series. But some of that X-Men stuff, especially in the later seasons where the art was clearly being rushed, it's not the best storytelling.
Yeah,
And it's kind of cheesy. Go back and try to watch Masters of the Universe. Just
yeah.
try it.
No, no,
Yeah,
no.
it's
And
tough. There are episodes that
yeah,
are better than others, but some of that
absolutely.
stuff is super cringe.
And
And
I
you
mean, I
have to
love
admit.
Master Universe. I love Transformers. I love GI Joe as a kid, but like they were made to sell toys. And there's
Sure.
nothing wrong with that. That's what they were supposed to do, and that's what they did. I don't think they counted on so many of us, especially Transformers, when they did the movie,
Oh,
to have that reaction. Like they even said in the one documentary behind the scenes, they're like, "Oh, we were just gonna bring in the new toys. We didn't realize." I was like, that was horrible to watch that as a kid, but that was such good storytelling that they didn't even intend
yeah.
to
And it
be
was
good
the first time
storytelling.
they took a risk with the property, right? For good, better, and different. There are things that I didn't like the whatever you want to call it, G2 afterwards, Rodimus as the leader. There are things that, but that was somebody else's favorite character.
Yeah,
But I think we all know people of certain age know what that felt like when, spoiler alert, for an old movie, when Optimus dies, right? You're like,
yeah.
no, no, no. Give
I
me more.
cried.
Give me Leonard Nimoy and Orson Welles. That's fine, but leave Optimus alone.
Yeah,
And but imagine, would we still be talking about it today? And Peter Cullen today, if we hadn't had something like that happen, where we do have that mix um, of horror and awfulness and dealing with death of your
yeah,
heroes. You
yeah.
know,
Because the
it
heroes
goes
never
back to like
died.
the creepiness of like a Dark Crystal and the
Yeah.
stuff, the horror, some of the awful death in that, and
Oh,
dealing with that as
the
a kid.
little podlings or whatever. The way they were
Oh
like sucking the life. Like I didn't watch that until
yeah,
college, and I was like,
yeah,
this would have traumatized me as a child.
yeah. And I mean, you see it today with like, and they got lambasted a bit for it, but like Grogu eating the eggs, right? Really gross when you think about it. Grogu eating these eggs of this frog lady who's in the hot tub with him.
Oh yeah, yeah,
Um,
yeah, yeah,
but we talk about it. We talk about the Negan scene in Walking Dead. We talk about these things that are controversial, and I think that's okay. It's okay to have different feelings about it. It's okay to like it. It's okay to not like it. But taking a chance and taking a risk, that's how we move forward, I think, with storytelling
Yeah,
and making things interesting.
I agree. I think back to that question about like the last couple of years, I think it has definitely become a lot more mainstream. I also think a lot of people our age, I know we've got a little bit of a gap between us,
Yeah.
but um,
Yeah, but
I'm
I'm from the South in the '80s, which is like 10 years behind everybody else. So I'm probably about 10 years behind emotionally and maturity wise, anyway.
so we're probably right about the same spot then.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
No, but like I think so many people our age are in that range are in positions to be making things and making decisions. So it's like, hey, I love this when I was a kid. I'm doing something like
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the
The
Horsemen
nerds
obviously,
won.
like they're a little bit ahead of us, but
Mm-hmm.
like they were teenagers when this stuff was going on. So like, and they're making this stuff. So I just think it's really cool that that's happening. And will this stuff eventually fade out? I think the Marvel movies have had a huge impact on that.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely Stranger Things, the Pops, and different action figure things that have been a little more like updated articulation quality wise, especially for the figure lines, but just the geek culture in general has really exploded. Um, I think in another way, it's because there's so many of us
Oh, sure.
that I mean, there's always been a lot of us that weren't quiet about it and just wore that flag the whole time. But I think there's so many more now. They're like, oh, I can do this. Like
Mm-hmm.
I can let people know I'm into this stuff that might be weird or whatever, and that's good.
No, it is good. I remember, back in the '90s when I was big into it's probably still back there, Magic the Gathering, right? I've been playing
Hmm.
Magic the Gathering for since 1993, and there was a time, and there still are times where I get a little uncomfortable. Like now, it's a different kind of uncomfortable because I'm an older man, and going into a games store and sitting down for a tournament, that's a little tougher as you get older anyway. Just you don't have the kind of time you had back then, but you get a little weirded out when you're playing against teenagers and stuff like that. But that's the nice thing about some of the Magic communities that I've been a part of is that you do have now fathers teaching their kids and playing with their kids and
Hmm.
introducing them into the game, and so there is sort of you have the old school guys that are coming back and since COVID, especially a lot of guys have gotten back into Magic the Gathering, which is weird because it's a social game. But a lot of the older guys are starting to get in touch with their childhood. We have the nostalgia run that's been happening currently. The '90s are cusping on the big nostalgia run now. So
Hmm.
because you're seeing those kids are now in charge, right? The kids who grew up watching SpongeBob and the kids who grew up watching, we're kind of at the tail end of that. But yeah, it's tough. I hate crushing kids in a tournament. I don't, but I'm always nice, and it's hard sometimes to walk that line because if you're playing Magic and you're playing competitively, which I don't do much of at all. I play like if anybody out there plays Magic, I play like more Cube or EDH Commander now, which is more social and more kitchen countertop. It's just more of what I'm into. I just don't have the drive to compete with people who are super overly competitive to the point where it affects their personality.
Right.
Right. Those are tough situations, right? The other tough situation is when I blow out a kid, I feel horrible about it. But you know what? If I can then like afterwards help him like talk about what's going on with his deck and certain things that he may have done differently, if I can continue to have that conversation and especially if their parents are around and I can sort of bring them
Yeah.
into it, that to me is rewarding in itself. But yeah, I say it's tough blowing out somebody in Magic. Of course, then you have my wife, who I taught how to play Magic, and her very first tournament, she won the entire. It was Innistrad for those of you who played. She won the whole tournament and won like a box. She won like a booster box of cards, and she
Oh
won like a
wow.
carrying bag and all kinds of stuff. And I'm like, how did you win your first tournament? They were all afraid because she was you get, and this happens with painters too. You get stuck in a rut of wanting to achieve a particular level of perfection, right? That
Yeah.
you don't account for chaos. Everything's so structured and ordered in high level magic that a noob like my wife, who has a great brain and a great problem solving brain, can come along and throw you a curveball and play a card that you would never consider playing and just completely dominate and destroy a tournament. And I've seen it happen a bunch of times with kids. But yeah, you don't really get that at the higher levels of Magic. But it's super fun to watch it when it does happen. That's what I love about the randomness of a game like that. Been playing the game for way too long.
Yeah, it's like I know I saw or listened to something where Steve Bisciotti and Jeremy were talking about painting and how there's so many new people coming in, and this was from months and months and months ago. Like, well, I'm not saying they were not talking about me, but like in the Cabal and like seeing all these new people coming in, and they're like, yeah, we feel like and they were having playful where they weren't like,
of course,
being bragful. Like they're very
we
respectful
need to
like that.
brag more, by the
Like,
way. You know that. We all need to brag a little more and be proud of ourselves and what we've
well, see, that's
accomplished.
why I like hanging with you guys. Like,
Right.
I'll brag to you about like I'll brag on you guys, and
Right.
it just gets reciprocal, and then I don't feel like I have to
Right.
brag on my stuff.
Right. And,
But
it's
they were
it's
talking
not
about it.
bragging, but make sure that you are proud.
Yeah.
Make sure that you look at your stuff, see how far you've come, right? Because I look at my old stuff and I'm like, who am I? How did I do something like, how did I do that face? I still don't know how I did it. But a year ago I could never have painted like that. And it's getting that inspiration and taking chances, learning new techniques.
Oh,
And
absolutely.
yeah, it's good stuff. And I'm proud of it. I'm proud that I was able to do that,
Yeah.
coming from where I came from and watching yourself get to that level where you feel like you're confident in what's up here, the vision you have in your head. If you can, once you get to the point where you can put that down on a figure and it looked the way that you had it in your head, there's a magic that happens at that point, and you're like, oh, I got it. It clicks, And you always have more work to do, right? I mean, I have a long ways to go. Confidence is key,
Yeah.
and pushing
Brian
through
just.
the ugly stages,
Oh yeah.
because
Yeah.
that is the hardest part. I'll get a crispy, beautiful paint job going, and then it's time for washes, and I fall apart. I'm scared to death that I'm going to ruin this beautiful finish that I've done on this very clean figure. And then I go to weather it, and I go in to throw in the washes, and you get midway through the wash, and you're like, oh God, is it too much? Is it too little? Oh, I can't take it back now. But then you realize that no, this is part of the process. And when I go back in and retouch the paints and do my dry brushing and add that extra layer, it's going to turn out beautifully. And once you get comfortable, more comfortable, because I'm never comfortable. As soon as I pick up like any sort of wash or make a wash, I'm like, I'm going to screw this up. I'm going to screw this up. And then I put it on there and I'm like, oh, it looks awful. It looks awful. And then I finish the rest of the process. And I'm like, oh, I could have had that had I not gone through that ugly phase where I had puddles or where I had to deal with, a bit of wash that got in the wrong ways. Exactly. Never be afraid to fail. Failure is the only growth. It's absolutely true. You have to learn how to fail, because guess what? At the end of the day, you just wash it off really with a little alcohol and repaint it.
Yeah. Yeah.
You can if you screw up that bad.
Yeah.
But
Like the worst thing you can do to a custom piece is dropping the 3D piece on the floor and it breaks.
Yes.
For the paint you can fix. But like Brian Duarte Studios, I don't know if I'm saying that right, Brian. I apologize if I said that wrong. He joined Mythic Legions, I think, what was it, in March? And I don't know if you've seen the pictures of his the chariot. Have you seen the Coliseum chariot he's done?
No, I'm
If
gonna
not,
have
I'll
to.
send you the pictures.
Send it to me, because I've got to check that out.
But yeah, check him. Brian, if you're still there, post your Insta link end of March. So he's only been in it for a couple months, and he's like, I don't want to spoil anything because I can't remember what he's done publicly, because I've got like a similar chat going with him
Sure.
on Facebook Messenger, and he's showing me the stuff he's doing, and it's blowing my mind. When I heard him say the other day that he had just started in March, I was like, "You haven't been in this for like 4 years?" Like,
Yeah,
blowing my mind.
it's wild. Some of these
Um,
guys are coming on here with brand new takes, right? And that's where it's important. Don't get caught in a rut doing Duarte at Duarte Studios. Okay, I'll grab that. But don't get in a rut painting the same way every time, right? Oh, I've got to do base, and then I've got to do wash, and then I've got to do top coat or dry brushing, and then I got to seal it. No,
yeah,
there's lots of other ways to do the same thing. Put your washes down before you put on your base coat. After you do your primer, and then dry brush on your base coat and let the underlying wash come through.
yeah,
Experiment with adding freckles and liver spots and stuff in one of the early coats so that it'll shine through when you come, or it'll peek through when you come and do your washes and your dry brushing. So and knowing that those mistakes that you make, you can just turn into a blemish or a liver spot, or when you
yeah.
have a slump. You were talking about dropping something earlier. The worst possible thing that's happened to me is I was so excited, and I was really excited to get the Caudle that Brian sculpted and that you painted.
Hmm.
I really wanted that. Of course, I dropped the head, and of
Oh,
course, yeah, and of course, a couple of the end pieces or
oh, the
these little guys
frills.
broke right off, and here I am with a pair of tweezers and super glue, and I got it, and I was like, oh, thank goodness. But I'm talking chips, dude. I'm talking like it was like doing what's that? There's a Japanese art style where they
Oh,
reconstruct pottery
kusaguri.
with gold. You know what? Huh?
I'm not going to say
Yes.
it right.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. So the Japanese art style where they repair something with gold, right? And so that's what I'm thinking. I'm like literally like just trying to get it just right on there so I don't lose that silhouette, right? And that's the only time I've ever dropped a piece and broken. No, that's not true. I have a man at arms that Anthony gifted me. I had the one that I used for my old man Duncan, and
oh
his
yeah,
top knot broke off, and that wasn't so bad of a fix. But yeah, I do drop stuff, and it is terrifying when I do it, especially if there's paint on it.
yeah. I dropped. I got a Wendigo skull. I can't remember if it was when I ordered and it was sent to me, or if it was a bonus sent to me because there was like a print mishap on it or something. But I was showing it to a friend at work and I dropped it
Wow.
and the antler broke, and I was like, oh, that's all right. I'll take one of the skulls from one of the axes and put that down like over the antler in between that, so it looks like the skull or the antler grew up through the
Oh yeah,
skull
yeah,
or
yeah, yeah,
whatever,
yeah.
And I'm like, cool,
Yeah, but that's the
um,
trick, right? You can take those mistakes. Yes, Kintsugi. I don't know how to pronounce it, but Kintsugi. Yeah.
yeah,
Um, but that's the thing is mistakes can become features. Mistakes can become details. If you're chopping up a head and you put a big gouge in it, guess what? Now you got a scar. You can work with that. You can accentuate that scar and make it more. Exactly, embracing flaws and
yep,
perfections, right? So we all screw up when we paint, especially around eyes or teeth or stuff like that. But you know what? So what? I got a little green on my orc tooth. Now it's
yeah,
maybe add a little brown, and now it's grime that's in his tooth. It's tartar or whatever you want to have. Um, you know,
yeah,
you, you can absolutely fix and turn those mistakes into features.
absolutely, yeah,
Mhm.
yeah. Very cool. Well, I could sit here and keep talking for another couple hours. I cannot believe it has been 2 hours already.
No,
Um,
this has been a real blast, and I appreciate you having me on, Jesse.
no, I'm glad you joined me. This was a lot of fun. We'll definitely have you back on once we get to meet up. You're going to Legions Con, right? Oh,
Oh yeah.
that's so cool.
So I'll be doing. Oops, blue tack. So yeah. I'm definitely going to be going to Legions Con. It's a blast. I'm so happy you're exhibiting. I can't wait. I thought about it, and maybe I will next year. But I also really like walking around and talking to people. So I want to make sure that I have plenty of time for that. And I'm super forward. I'll be going to ChrisCon which is a super cool convention. If you're in
Oh,
New England
nice.
or can get to New England, ChrisCon, look it up. Hashtag ChrisCon 2022. Jeremy's going to be there from Mythic Legions. We're going to have customs contests. Hongo will show
Oh,
up.
awesome.
My Frost Giant here will show up. And I can't wait to see what people bring and how much fun we have both at ChrisCon. And then I know you're going to PowerCon, so congratulations on. Oh, great. Jacob's going to be at ChrisCon. Fantastic.
Yes.
And I can't wait to see all of you guys who can make it to Legions Con. If you are apprehensive about Legions Con, if you're apprehensive and you have anxiety about that sort of thing, and you ever want to talk about it, reach out to me, because I felt the same exact way standing in that line. I didn't know what it was going to be like. You know, am I going to feel rejected? Is this going to be weird? Is it? No. It's like coming home. It's like meeting hundreds of your best friends who all
Yeah,
feel about toys the way you do. So that's my plug for
absolutely.
Legions Con. Do it. And if you have questions about it, questions about anxiety, about it, that kind of stuff, give me a buzz.
Yeah, shoot. Feel free to reach out to me as well. Instagram or Facebook, or I think I got my email listed here somewhere. Yeah, just reach out. Um, yeah, totally. And Duart, that's Brian. He's one of the guys I'm going to PowerCon with. So, like, so many people I'm going to be
Outstanding.
meeting this year. A couple months ago, I didn't know existed, and here we are having a 2-hour conversation, like old friends.
This is the world, and that's the world that we live in.
Yeah,
Because you know what, we all go through. While not exact, but we have similar stories. I think people of our age, especially males, who are kind of at the point where we're at in our lives, where we're letting go of some of that macho garbage and talking about our feelings more, which is important. And we're ripping off that stigma of mental health. The conversations you've had on mental health and with your guests have been inspiring and important. And probably this is why I'm in this community. It's because we can have people like you. We can have people like Curtis. We can have all the wonderful folks that are in this community teach us how to be better people, and maybe we can have the same influence on a couple of guys coming up.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Well, I feel the exact same way. This has
Yeah,
been it's just really cool getting to know all of you and the new people, and even in the chat, in the cabal, in the our group message on Instagram and everything, has been really cool. There's just so many thoughts running through my head. I feel like I'm spacing out here, but like it's just so overwhelmingly good and positive, and
yeah. And who thought? Who thought that this stage in our lives we could find this? It's awesome.
yeah,
We're awesome.
yeah,
David,
indeed,
I love David. He does some really
yeah,
cool stuff. Awesome. All right, guys. Well, thanks so much again, Jesse. I appreciate it.
yeah. Thanks for joining me, Danny. And make sure everybody check out River Swifticon
Riverswift.
on
Yeah,
Instagram.
we got it. All
River
right, guys.
Swifticon. Catch you later.
Catch you later, guys. Bye bye.
Everybody, thank you so much for joining me here tonight, and Danny. This was a really great conversation. I really enjoy doing these. Um, it's been so cool to see all the comments and how everybody has been interacting. At the end of the day, the main thing I want to get out of this, or is what Danny was just talking about, passing this stuff on to other people, encouraging other people, and just sharing the. I mean, I know it's such a cheesy thing to say, sharing the love of the community of these toys and just geekdom in general. We don't have to hide those freak flags when it comes to this stuff, because at the end of the day, it's not that freaky. It's just what we like. And hey, Scott. Yep, we're just wrapping up. But it was a great conversation, um, and a really good time. This is so much fun getting to do this. Um, yeah, I don't know. I don't have anyone lined up next week yet. I got to see how things are going. But I'll reach out and maybe we'll get something planned up. I know I'll probably be missing the weekend, first weekend in August for PowerCon. And I know Michael Casper asked earlier that we need more Mythic minutes, and he's absolutely right. I will be doing some more of those little short ones coming up soon. Um, So stay tuned for that. In the meantime, thanks again for watching. Have a great night and good week whenever you're watching this. And always remember, just shelve it. No, no. What's my tagline? What's on your shelf? All right, guys. Thanks. Have a great night.